All right, I'll start by talking about the do now. So I'm not sure how far you got on this, but people were asked, I'm to look at this, and we started by saying, okay, I'm thinking of a number, and then they had time to think of it. So for an example, maybe someone said, oh, maybe the number is 10. So I wrote down 10, and then we went through each part of this. So 10, you multiply the number times 4. Okay, well, that's 40. And then what? Add -4 to the product. So 40 minus 4, or 40 plus -4, is 36. And then take a third of the sum. So take a third of 36. So that's like multiplying by a third or dividing by 3. So 36 divided by 3 is 12. And did we get the answer of -6? No, of course not. We got the number 12. So a lot of people were going through, taking guesses, and the bottom line was, even after tons of people taking tons of guesses, we never really came up with the correct number doing this method. So what is the easier way? And today's lesson was all about writing equations from word problems. And the first thing that you want to do when you're writing an equation from a word problem is you want to define the variable. So that means you can pick any variable you want, but then you have to tell people what that variable means. So in this case, the unknown is this number, right? I'm thinking of a number. Guess a number. That is what we don't know. So I started by saying, okay, well, let's define that variable. I'll pick the letter N. So I'm going to say N represents a number, right? Sometimes word problems, you're talking about monkeys or cupcakes or students, but in this case, we're talking about a number. A number, not a numbers. That makes no sense. Okay. So N represents a number. Now let's go back to the words. Sorry. And see if we can figure out, okay, now what words are matching up? So we have our number. If you multiply that number by 4, so what would that look like? We have saying multiply, have that number. I'm multiplying it by 4. I could represent that as 4n. So we took care of that. And then we add a -4, like it's saying. And to the product, oh, we add -4 to the product, took care of that. And then take a third of the sum. So that would mean I would have to multiply this entire thing, right? We would have to do that addition first, then multiply by a third. So that's one way we could write this equation, word for word, or we could write 4n plus a -4. We could write that as -4. And then the same thing as multiplying by a third is dividing by 3. So I'm not sure if you can really see this because I wrote over the words, but I wrote 4n minus 4 divided by 3. And let's not forget, all of this is supposed to equal -6. So students then practiced solving these equations. They chose one. This bottom equation is actually a bit easier to solve. So that's what we did today in the do now. All right, so on to the classwork. The classwork, we focused on first this problem, problem number 2, and then we also focused on problem number 3. So hopefully you had time to read this. An American football team gained 9 yards on its first play. On some plays after that, the team lost 2 yards per play. The team finished with a total of 3 yards gained. How many plays did the team lose 2 yards per play? So we're starting with defining that variable. What is the unknown? Well, we're wondering how many plays, right? So we can say right away that, no, I don't like it when it's this thin. P represents the number of plays. Okay. So now we can go through and look at the words. So the team gained 9 yards. That's important. Hopefully you recognize that gaining 9 yards would represent a positive 9. On some plays after that, so this is where we don't know, some number of plays, this is my letter P, the team lost 2 yards per play. So they lost 2 yards per play. When I see the word per, I think, oh, multiplication. So they lost 2 yards per play. And then they finished with a total of 3 yards gained, so a positive 3. Now we have to think what's happening here. It's hard because I can't point. What's happening here? This, is this highlighting? I don't know. This little section in between the 9 and the negative 2p. We need an operator there, right? Because this, we're not multiplying. We're not saying 9 times negative 2 times p. So what's happening here? They started with 9, and then whatever happened, we're going to add whatever this negative 2 times p is. Another way we could write this equation, we could flip it. Sometimes it's easier to solve in this order for people. But we took a look at one of those two equations, and then students chose one to practice solving one of those equations to end up with their answer of how many plays did the team lose 2 yards per play. All right, and then you can actually skip this. So you can skip this page. And then we looked at problem number 3, the field trip problem. So hopefully take a moment, read the problem, see if you can figure out what an equation might look like. So pause this video and then come back. All right, so hopefully you've had time to read this. I asked people to think about this in their own words. What's happening? Well, you have a class going on a field trip, right? So you have students, 7th graders, you have some adults, some people are riding on a bus, everyone else is riding in a van. So one way that we talked about this is looking at this before we even got to an equation. Some people thought, well, what if I used a tape diagram? Because tape diagrams, I know you guys did a lot of that in 6th grade, and we can still use this, right? So I have a tape diagram. I'm breaking it into thirds because of this 2/3. So 2/3 of the people are on a bus, right? So these people are on a bus. And how many people is that? Well, that's 54 people. So from there, hopefully you remember from 6th grade now, that tells me how I'm filling in those 2 boxes, and then whatever's in those 2 boxes, it's the same for this box. And now that will help me find all the people, right? How many people are on the field trip? So that's one way. Another way that we can do that is by using an equation. So we know that these people are on a field trip. We don't know how many 7th graders there are. So we could say that let S represent the number of 7th graders. Okay. So we have the 7th graders plus 7 adults on the field trip. That would be our total amount of people, right? 2/3 of those people are on the bus, and that 2/3 of the people is 54. Okay, this will help us figure out how many people are on the field trip. Okay, so try solving this equation, try figuring this out. Really, that's as far as we got in class today, but trying this packet, trying to write word problems, trying to write equations from word problems One part of your homework oh, it's not here. One part of your homework, when you see it, says something about consecutive integers, right? What does that look like? That would be numbers in a row. So 12, 13, 14, right? 5, 6, 7. Those would be three consecutive integers. That would be three consecutive integers. If I make a video later on for the homework and tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit more about this wording. I hope this video was helpful.